Blind Justice presents a hero and a city with secrets hidden by the cloak of night. What's Done in the Dark, the audio drama.
The air hung heavy with the aroma of garlic, oregano, and simmering tomato sauce. A low murmur of conversation, punctuated by the clinking of glasses, filled the dimly lit Italian restaurant. Red checkered tablecloths and flickering candlelight created an intimate atmosphere. This was their first date. Dominic, with an easy smile and a secret, sat across from Kevin. Kevin, with kind eyes and a hopeful heart, beamed back at him. Dominic nervously twirled his wine glass. The restaurant, with its old-world charm, felt both exciting and unnerving. He was used to the shadows, to operating as blind justice, the city's enigmatic protector. This, a candlelit dinner with a man he was growing increasingly fond of, was new territory. Kevin, oblivious to Dominic's internal struggle, seemed perfectly at ease. He sipped his wine, his eyes twinkling with amusement as he listened to Dominic recount a particularly humorous story about his eccentric landlady. Their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by the occasional interjection from the waiter. A man of indeterminate age with dark, piercing eyes and a tightly lipped smile. He moved with a quiet grace that was almost unsettling. He refilled their glasses, his presence a silent specter at the edge of their burgeoning connection. Each time he leaned in, a subtle chill seemed to settle over the table, a discordant note in the otherwise harmonious melody of their date.
So, Dominic, tell me more about yourself. What do you do for a living?
The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Dominic knew this was more than just casual conversation. This was Kevin probing, trying to understand the man behind the charming smile. He took a sip of his wine, buying himself a moment to formulate a response that wouldn't betray his double life. Oh, you know, this and that. I like to keep busy. He flashed Kevin a disarming smile, hoping to steer the conversation away from the dangerous territory it was approaching. Kevin, however, was persistent.
Come on, there must be something specific you can tell me. Unless you're leading a secret life as a spy or something.
Little did Kevin know how close to the mark he was. Dominic, master of the shadows, felt a flicker of panic rise within him. A spy? Now who would want to spy on me? He laughed, hoping his nervousness didn't show. He tried to change the subject, asking Kevin about his work as a teacher at a school for the disabled, a job that seemed so ordinary, so mundane compared to his own thrilling yet perilous existence.
Actually, there's something I wanted to ask you about.
Dominic's pulse quickened. He knew what was coming. He'd seen the way Kevin looked at him, the unspoken longing in his eyes. Had he misjudged the situation? Was Kevin about to confess his feelings, unaware of the danger that lurked just beneath the surface of their seemingly ordinary date?
I've been seeing you around the apartment building and been wanting to ask you out for a while now.
Relief washed over Dominic. It wasn't a confession of love, not yet. But the danger wasn't over. Not with the waiter still hovering nearby, his eyes like two burning coals in the dimly lit restaurant. The waiter leaned into Dominic, a smirk playing on his lips.
I know your little secret, blind justice.
Dominic froze. The blood drained from his face. Kevin, oblivious to the silent exchange, continued.
The school used to be a haven, a place of quiet contemplation. Now, it's all whispers and nervous glances. These blind justice attacks have really shaken the city. People are scared, Dominic, on edge. It's all anyone can talk about at work.
Dominic tried to swallow, his throat suddenly dry. He wanted to reach out, to reassure Kevin, to tell him everything would be all right. But the words wouldn't come. The waiter, Bill, his name tag proclaimed in bold black letters, continued to stare at Dominic, a knowing smirk playing on his lips.
Some say he's a hero, others a vigilante, a menace.
He placed a hand on Dominic's arm, his touch surprisingly strong.
What do you think, sir? Hero or menace?
Dominic forced a smile, his heart pounding against his ribs. I think that it's dangerous to make judgments about things we don't understand. He met Bill's gaze, his own expression carefully neutral.
Well, I, for one, am glad someone is doing something about all the crime in Ravenhurst. The police seem powerless to stop it. Maybe blind justice is just what this city needs. A wake-up call.
Dominic nodded slowly, trying to maintain his composure. He needed to get out of there to warn the other Titans. Something was wrong. This wasn't a coincidence. He glanced at Bill, his senses screaming danger. There was something off about the waiter, something in the way he moved, the way he watched them, that set Dominic on edge. It was then that Dominic noticed it. A small, metallic device, almost invisible against Bill's dark skin, implanted at the base of his neck. It was a control device. Dominic had seen them before. He'd even used them himself, back in his days with the Institute. A cold dread washed over him. Someone was controlling Bill. Someone was using him to get to Dominic. But who and why? Before Dominic could react, Bill lunged. He grabbed a steak knife from the table, the polished silver glinting ominously in the dim light. The other diners, oblivious to the danger, continued their conversations, their laughter a jarring counterpoint to the sudden violence that had erupted at Dominic and Kevin's table. Kevin gasped, his eyes wide with terror, scrambling back in his chair. Dominic reacted instinctively, his years of training kicking in. He swept his arm across the table, sending silverware and glasses flying towards Bill's face. The waiter, his movements unnaturally fast, deflected the projectiles with ease. The steak knife flashed, aimed directly at Dominic's heart. Dominic twisted, narrowly avoiding the blow. He could feel the wind whistle past his ear as the knife sliced through the air where his chest had been a moment before. He kicked out, connecting with Bill's chest and sending the waiter crashing into a nearby table. The sound of shattering glass and startled screams filled the air. "We have to go." Dominic didn't hesitate. He grabbed Kevin's hand, pulling him to his feet, adrenaline surging through his veins. But Bill was already back on his feet, his eyes blazing with a cold, inhuman fury. He charged at Dominic, the steak knife held high. Dominic ducked under the blow, feeling the sharp blade graze his hair. He spun around, delivering a swift kick to Bill's jaw. But the waiter didn't even flinch. He just kept coming, relentless, unstoppable. Dominic realized with a sickening certainty that this wasn't a fair fight. Bill was being controlled, enhanced. He was a puppet, dancing to someone else's tune. Dominic had to end this quickly, before anyone else got hurt. He focused his mind, reaching out with his telekinesis. He could sense the control device, a small pulsing beacon in the back of Bill's mind. Just stay close. He squeezed Kevin's hand, his touch both a reassurance and a silent apology. They moved through the panicked crowd, Dominic's senses on high alert. He could feel the fear, the confusion, the adrenaline that pulsed through the air like a living thing. It was the same energy that always surrounded blind justice, the energy of chaos and uncertainty. He shielded Kevin with his body, guiding him towards the kitchen, hoping to find a back exit. But Bill was relentless, his movements a blur as he cut a path through the panicked diners. Dominic caught glimpses of his face, contorted in a silent snarl, his eyes vacant, devoid of any humanity. He was a weapon, a living, breathing tool of someone else's malice. The clatter of pots and pans, the shouts of the cooks, the sizzle of oil in hot pans all washed over Dominic as they entered the chaotic heart of the restaurant. Heat radiated from the ovens, the air thick with the smell of grease and spices. It was a sensory overload, but Dominic pushed through it, his focus on one thing, getting Kevin to safety. This way. He caught a glimpse of a heavy metal door, probably leading to an alleyway. It was their only chance. This way. He urged Kevin, pulling him towards the door, but as they reached it, Bill slammed into Dominic, sending him crashing against a wall. Pain exploded in Dominic's shoulder, but he ignored it, adrenaline numbing the worst of it. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes never leaving Bill. The waiter advanced, the steak knife glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights of the kitchen. "Stay back!" Dominic yelled, his voice hoarse. He didn't want to fight, not here, not with Kevin in danger, but he wouldn't hesitate to do whatever it took to protect him. Bill laughed, a chilling, empty sound.
You can't hide from me, Blind Justice. Your time is up.
Kevin stood frozen, his eyes darting between Dominic and Bill, his face pale with fear and confusion.
Dominic, what's going on? Who is this guy?
Dominic didn't have time to explain. He needed to end this now. He focused all his will, all his power on the control device in the back of Bill's mind. He could feel it there, a tiny pulsing point of energy. He reached out with his mind, his telekinesis wrapping around the device like a vice. He squeezed, pouring all his anger, all his fear into that one point. Bill screamed, a high-pitched, inhuman wail, as the device overloaded, short-circuiting. He collapsed to the floor, the steak knife clattering harmlessly away. Dominic rushed to Kevin's side, pulling him into a tight embrace. He could feel Kevin's heart pounding against his chest, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. "It's okay," Dominic murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "It's over now." But even as he said the words, he knew it was a lie. It was far from over. This was just the beginning. Kevin pulled back, his eyes searching Dominic's face.
Who was that? What did he mean, blind justice?
Dominic hesitated, his secret a heavy weight in his chest. He had never intended for Kevin to find out this way, but he could no longer keep up the charade. He took a deep breath. Kevin, that man, he was being controlled. He paused, his heart pounding in his chest.
And?
Kevin prompted, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. And, Dominic continued, his voice barely above a whisper, he was sent to kill me, because I am blind justice. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken consequences. Kevin stared at Dominic, his expression unreadable. Then slowly a look of understanding dawned on his face. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and gently touched Dominic's cheek.
I knew it. I knew there was something special about you.
Dominic managed a weak smile. He had been so afraid of Kevin's reaction, of rejection, of fear. But Kevin wasn't afraid. He was intrigued. "But we have to go," Dominic said, his voice regaining its urgency. "If they sent someone after me, they might come after the others too." He thought of Daniel, Christian, Irving, and Andre, his fellow Titans out there, unaware of the danger that lurked in the shadows. He had to warn them. He had to protect them. He took Kevin's hand, his grip firm. "Come on," he said, leading him towards the back door. "I'll explain everything." As they slipped out into the cool night air, the sounds of sirens wailing in the distance, Dominic knew that their lives had just changed forever. He strained, focusing his telekinetic energy, picturing the device in his mind. It was like trying to crush a pebble with his thoughts, the metal resisting his every attempt. Sweat beaded on Dominic's brow, his vision blurring at the edges. He had to fight through the pain, through the exhaustion. Kevin's life, the lives of the other Titans depended on it. Kevin cried out, his voice laced with terror and concern. He could sense Dominic's struggle, the sheer effort it took to control his powers, but he couldn't understand it, couldn't comprehend the invisible battle raging within the confines of Bill's mind. The air crackled with energy, the scent of ozone stinging Dominic's nostrils. He felt a surge of power, raw and uncontrolled, coursing through him. It was intoxicating, addictive, but he couldn't afford to get lost in it. Not now, Dominic. With a final, desperate push, Dominic crushed the device. It imploded, a silent burst of energy that sent Bill crumpling to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. The vacant look in his eyes vanished, replaced by confusion and fear. He looked around the kitchen, his chest heaving, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. He stammered, his voice weak and shaky. Dominic lowered his defenses, allowing the mental static of the city to wash over him. He needed to know who was behind this attack, needed to understand why someone would target him and his friends. He focused on Bill's fading memories, sifting through the mental debris for any clue, any hint of the puppet master pulling the strings. Images flickered through Dominic's mind. Bill, dazed and disoriented, being led through a sterile white hallway. A voice, cold and calculating, issuing orders, and then a face, Mayor Rashad. Dominic's blood ran cold. Mayor Rashad, the city's beloved leader, the man who had vowed to clean up Ravenhurst's corruption, was the one behind the attack. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was right there, imprinted on the canvas of Bill's mind. Dominic breathed, the name leaving his lips like a curse. He could feel Kevin watching him, his eyes filled with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. He had so many questions that Dominic didn't have the time or the energy to answer. Not now, Rashad. We have to go, Dominic said, his voice tight with urgency. If Rashad is behind this, then the others are in danger too. He thought of Irving, of Andre, of the other Titans scattered across the city, vulnerable, unaware of the threat that lurked in the shadows. He had to warn them, had to protect them.
Dominic, what's going on?
Kevin's hand tightened on Dominic's arm, his touch both grounding and terrifying. Dominic looked into Kevin's eyes, saw the fear and the concern, but also a flicker of something else. Admiration? Disbelief? He had never meant for Kevin to find out this way, in a whirlwind of violence and fear. But there was no escaping the truth now. Not with Bill's broken body at their feet, not with the weight of Mayor Rashad's betrayal crushing down on him. Kevin, he began, his voice rasping, raw with exhaustion and the effort of holding back his powers. Bill, he was sent to kill me. He hesitated, the words catching in his throat. This was it. The moment he revealed his true self, the moment he risked losing Kevin forever. Because I am blind justice, he finished, his voice barely a whisper. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken consequences. Kevin stared at him, his expression unreadable. Dominic braced himself for the rejection, the fear, the inevitable pulling away. But then, slowly, a smile spread across Kevin's face.
I knew it. There was always something different about you.
Dominic let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Kevin wasn't afraid. He wasn't repulsed. He was intrigued. But that's not important right now, Dominic said, shaking his head, the weight of the situation crashing back down on him. He couldn't afford to get lost in this moment, not with the lives of his friends hanging in the balance. Rashad knows who I am. If he sent Bill after me, he could send others after the rest of the Titans. He had to get to the Titans, had to warn them before it was too late. We need to go, Dominic said, pulling Kevin towards the back exit of the kitchen. The alleyway was dark, the stench of garbage and despair clinging to the damp brick walls. But it was a haven compared to the chaos they were leaving behind.
Dominic, wait. What about Bill? What about the people inside?
Dominic hesitated. He couldn't just leave Bill here, disoriented and confused. And the other diners, the staff, they were all witnesses. I'll handle it. You need to get somewhere safe. Safe? Dominic, what's going on? Why would the mayor want to hurt you? Dominic shook his head. He didn't have time to explain, not now. I'll tell you everything, but first, I need you to trust me. He leaned in, pressing a quick kiss to Kevin's lips. Go home, lock your doors, and don't open them for anyone. Before Kevin could protest further, Dominic turned and disappeared back into the restaurant, leaving Kevin standing alone in the darkness. The bass reverberated through Irving's chest, a steady pulse that matched the frantic rhythm of his heart. He took a long swig of his beer, the bitter liquid doing little to quench the thirst that seemed to burn in his throat. Around him, the strip club throbbed with a life of its own. Flashing lights painted the dancers' bodies in shades of desire and despair, their movements a mesmerizing dance of seduction and escape. Across the table, Andre laughed, his eyes glued to the stage where a woman with ruby red lips and a cascade of raven hair moved with a practiced sensuality. The air hung heavy with the scent of perfume, sweat, and desperation, a potent cocktail that both intoxicated and repulsed Irving. He envied Andre's ability to lose himself in the moment, to forget the weight of their other life, the one that lurked beneath the surface of their carefully constructed normalcy. He scanned the room, his senses on high alert. Even in the heart of the city's underbelly, in a place designed to distract and disarm, Irving couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had been gnawing at him all night. It was a primal instinct, honed from years of living in the shadows, of fighting for survival in a world that sought to crush those like him. He caught a glimpse of movement in the VIP section, a flicker of shadows against the velvet ropes. Two figures cloaked in darkness whispered to each other, their faces obscured by the dim light. Irving's gut clenched. This place, with its illusion of pleasure and abandon, suddenly felt like a trap.
We need to go.
He muttered, his voice barely audible above the thumping music.
Relax, man. Have another drink. Enjoy the show.
Andre, lost in the hypnotic sway of the dancer's hips, waved him off, his words thick with alcohol and desire. Irving gritted his teeth. Andre, always the carefree one, seemed oblivious to the danger that pulsed around them, a silent threat coiling in the darkness. But Irving couldn't ignore it. He had seen that look in the eyes of their enemies before, the cold, calculating gaze of predators sizing up their prey. And tonight, they were the ones being hunted. He reached out, his hand closing around Andre's wrist in a grip that was both urgent and reassuring.
Andre, we need to leave now.
This time, the urgency in Irving's voice cut through the haze of alcohol and lust. Andre blinked, his brow furrowing as he struggled to focus on Irving's face. Before he could protest, the music stopped. Silence descended upon the club, sudden and absolute, amplifying the pounding of blood in Irving's ears. On stage, the dancer froze mid-pose, her smile fading into an empty, vacant stare. Her eyes, once filled with practiced seduction, were now cold and lifeless, reflecting the flickering lights of the stage like shards of broken glass. And then, slowly, deliberately, she turned her head towards them, a predator identifying its prey.